Centerville City Council of August 6, 2019 is now in session. We'd like to thank everyone who is in attendance here tonight and welcome you. Let's start with the roll call to make sure we can conduct business, starting to my far left with Councilwoman Ivy.
Ivy here.
Fillmore present.
Yentz present.
Meekum present.
McEwen here.
Let it be noted that all 5 council members are present. Let's start with a prayer or thought, and that will be given by myself. Our Heavenly Father, we are very grateful for this opportunity that we have to meet as citizens of this fine city. We're grateful for the responsibility that we all have to be able to obey and honor and sustain the law. And bless us as we have discussions this evening, that we may be able to have the intent and the needs of our residents in mind. Bless those that are consistently out working on our behalf. Bless those that protect our safety, police and fire and other. Bless those that take care of our roads to make them safe, and in any service that may take place in our city. We're grateful, Father in heaven, for the inspired forms of government that we have that allows the people to be able to govern and have a say in all that we do. Bless us at this time that we may be use good judgment and to be of sound mind, and these things we pray for and do so in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
If you'd all rise with me and repeat the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So we always have in our council meetings an open session where anyone is allowed to come up to the microphone and to voice any questions that they ask, any questions they may have, voice any concerns or things that they like that are going on. So that is now at this time the open session, and if you do come forward, state your name and where you're from, and try and keep your comments to a couple minutes. So the open session is now available. If no comments from the public in the open session, then we'll move on. The first item of business on our calendar is what we call our summary action calendar. And there are 6 items on the summary action calendar. Authorize purchase of police departments, approve storm drain impact fee credit, renew street sweeping project, renew drainage maintenance project, approve development agreement with South Davis Sewer District, and approve Duncan Hills amended subdivision. Do we have any questions or comments on those before I entertain a motion to approve summary action calendar?
I had some questions in my mind about item number D, the drainage maintenance project, and exactly what that constitutes. And could we get
Is that one
recap
you're
on
here
that?
for, Kevin? Sure. Come on up, because that's what Kevin is here for, a couple of the summary action calendars. We all know you, but state your name for YouTube, would you, and where you're from.
Yes, Kevin Campbell, Centerville City Engineer, live here in Centerville. The drainage maintenance contract is a yearly contract that what we've done in the past is several years ago we bid the project out. Twin D was awarded the project. And one of the stipulations on the notice of award is that the contract could be renewed if they were willing to hold their unit prices through the next year, and if the city still wanted to retain them. And so Dave Walker approached Twin D. They were willing to hold their unit prices from last year. And Dave's happy with their work. The scope of the work is basically cleaning and TV cameraing storm drains and sub-drains throughout the city to keep them cleaned and maintained, keep them running properly. So storm drain maintenance, sub-drain maintenance is what they're doing.
Haven't we had some problems with that over the last couple of years, that there were backups that weren't anticipated and other problems?
One that comes to mind is there was a pipe underneath I-15 that collapsed last summer. The city has had, I think, one sub-drain that had an issue that there was a claim on. Lisa might be able to speak more to that. And so they are on call when situations like that arise. Dave can usually get them fairly quickly and get them out to clean a sub-drain in an instance where there's a backup. Day to day, they're just going throughout the city and kind of prioritizing which systems Dave deems ought to be. You know, he keeps track of what's been cleaned over the years and kind of moves throughout the city. Unless there's an emergency, then he would direct them to that.
So for that $88,000, does every drain get looked at every year? Every drain get looked at every third year?
I would have to
How do we
ask-
lose something under
yeah.
the freeway, which is particularly critical?
So that was actually a UDOT system that we, that one's one that just came to mind, but we don't actually maintain most of those. That was actually a UDOT system. I would have to talk to Dave and see how much of the city he's getting to each year with that budget. I don't know if it's a quarter or half. I would have to ask that question of Dave Walker.
And is the $88,000 strictly inspection, or is that cleaning?
It's cleaning.
They have a unit price for both. They have a unit price for cleaning. They have different pipe sizes, so they have different unit prices depending on the pipe diameter. And it's typically hourly. Do we have a copy of the bid schedule? I don't know if we do.
None.
But we could get one, and you could kind of see the line items, how it's bid. There's both, again, cleaning and TV cameraing of different diameter systems.
So this isn't a bid, and then they take care of whatever we need taken care of. They could come in at less than this if we don't need them as much. I mean, how is this figure came up with? Are we just approving it so that Dave knows he can go up to that much? I mean, I'm like with Bill, are we getting a certain amount for this? Or if we call them out in the middle of the night, do we get an extra bill? And is that above and beyond this?
This is a per hour or per foot price. Dave has it set up to where he's typically using the entire budget, so he has a footage that he's trying to get through for the year. So we're only paying for the work that is accomplished. So that is a good question again, is how much of the city is he getting through each year? I know that they do have an emergency call out price, so if he calls them out and he says, hey, we've got to have you here in the next 4 hours, there's an emergency mobilization that they would charge us to in an emergency situation like that. But
If I can interject, Kevin, so that would be actually charged differently. That's a different line item, right, Jake, that we've created for these emergencies. This is just routine, generally the routine maintenance of accomplishing a certain percentage of the city a year.
It's a great question, though, as to what that percentage is. It would be interesting to know if this gets you 1/3,
I believe it was 1/3, but
10%.
I haven't talked to Dave.
We have a map that has targeted streets that need to be done at least every single year. And then besides those, we hit 50% of the remaining. That's the target.
So at a minimum, everyone is done every other year.
Yes. Yeah, it's not more than once.
With the assumption that everything that's part of critical subdrain, big feeders are all getting done every year.
Right.
Okay.
Well, it's primarily the areas that tend to get more debris in them.
Okay, so not by volume, just
Not by
by
volume.
historical.
By historically how much
Okay.
they get out of it, yeah.
Yeah, some of the subdrain systems, especially if they're in areas where there are trees, those are probably on the every year list, because if those roots plug up those systems, we start backing water up into basements.
Good thing you weren't here an hour ago. Roots and trees are coming up again.
I would like to see a summary of what was done and what that's there, but at the same point in time, I don't know that I think, I at least would like to hold it up for that. So I would make a motion that we approve the items on the summary action calendar, but request that sometime in the next couple of months that Dave come in and give us a summary of this contract and the total amount that was expended, both for the base and any call-out type work.
Right, was this size to get us the level of effort we thought, or we spent more in extra cleaning on one or two streets, whatever? Yeah, I agree. I would second that.
So a motion is second. We have any further discussion? If not, it appears we're ready to take a vote on the summary action calendar items with that motion in the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm opposed. I'd like to do it as a roll call due to the amounts.
You'd like to do it as a roll call?
I would
It's huge
respectfully
numbers
request
of
we do it as a
money.
roll call.
The spending.
For each item?
I'm okay with
The
it
cost?
being the calendar, because it sounds like it's going to come out the same way, but.
But a
it's
roll
just-
call on the calendar.
Roll
Okay.
call against the calendar.
We can do that. Councilwoman Ivy?
Aye.
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 The motion passes 5-0. Okay. Thank you. Item number 2, this is something that Brant and I went over this morning, and he is going to discuss that. We do not have a presentation by somebody from Horsepower.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So Chief, Randy, and myself met with Horsepower Fleet a couple of months ago at this point. They presented their program. Their program has changed since they received the state contract for leasing. What was being leased, you could lease a brand-new SUV Ford Explorer for $3,500 a year is now $5,500 a year. So it's gone up drastically, and so when you do the math over just a 5-year term, that's the math I like to do, you go over a 5-year term, and what does that cost for that vehicle? Well, that's $27,500 for leasing that vehicle. You can buy a brand-new vehicle for $27,500 at this point, brand new. So there's no cost savings, and at the end of that 5 years, we could turn around and sell that for $4,000 or $5,000. So you're not really benefiting. The other factor that you bring into this is the maintenance. Over 5 years, you're going to be replacing tires, potentially transmission if it's a terrible vehicle, which has happened, brakes. So you factor that into your analysis, but I just don't see a cost savings there to lease the vehicles. So we still need to purchase 2 vehicles. So what we're going to be doing, I spoke with Corey about it. The general plan, we didn't intend on starting that until next year anyway. So what we're going to do is reallocate that $80,000 we had for the general plan to the police department to purchase those 2 new vehicles. So we're not losing anything. Police department is not falling behind in acquiring their vehicles. But that's what we're proposing to do with that, so they could still get their vehicles.
Any questions for Brant on that?
I'm just going to make a general statement on this. So I read everything in my packet, definitely, and this is by far the worst one-sided leasing agreement I've ever seen. I think you could do a rent-to-own place that would probably give you better terms than this.
Hear,
I mean,
hear.
this is
Yes.
really a one-sided agreement. I was shocked by some of the terms that were in here.
I'll email you Lisa's comments. So,
We know you have us covered, Lisa.
so that's really what it came down to. So this is the lease agreement that's approved through the state. So there's really little wiggle room in what you can do here. And that's really what it came down to. When we got the lease agreement and we reviewed it, that was part of also the termination, is it's just not worth this. And so we said, no, we'll just go ahead and purchase vehicles at this point.
Even if you had like a 30 or 40% upside on the resale value of the vehicle, just the terms in this are just so
Punitive.
mercenary and punitive, and where all the value is retained by the other side. I just couldn't see anything where like, why would I ever sign this? Yeah,
It makes me wonder what the state is recommending, for crying out loud.
Well, I got to be careful with how far I go on that one.
Yeah,
But I'm just like,
I don't.
I don't understand why this one is papered anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I wondered the same thing. Any insight on that?
So this is the agreement, similar to the agreement that we signed in Ephraim with them. But of course, the deal was much sweeter then, where you're paying $2,000 a year for an F-350 Lariat diesel. And it was great. I mean, you're paying $2,000. But I will tell you that working with horsepower for the last 3-4 years, I'm going to be on record of this, they're not very sophisticated. So even though these are in the terms of the agreement, they never enforced any of these types of things. They're actually easy to work with. So their agreement is this because their attorney said your agreement needs to be this way. But I will tell you, they don't enforce it. You sign a 1-year lease, you're keeping vehicles for 18 months for the same price. So sometimes with their lack of being on top of things is actually in your benefit. So I've never had an issue with them. They've actually been great to work with. But with the increased cost, it's just not worth the risk at this time.
Oh, but when you were saying it's the only state approved, you just mean this is the only state approved company to work with for this
So
lease
they have
agreement?
the state contract to lease city vehicles.
Right.
So-
I thought you were saying that the state had a say in the lease agreement, so.
Well, this
that
agreement
was-
with the state had some opinion on how this works, but
Yeah.
anyway.
Okay.
Well, just for future reference, if some, I don't, sorry, Lisa, I don't even need a city attorney to tell me this is a bad deal. There's no nuances in this. This is a club agreement. I'm sorry if I'm being too brutal, but I was like, I've read this thing twice and I can't find a place where I would actually sign this in its form.
Well, I'm glad he's not here to be questioned, positioned by this group.
He should feel lucky.
He should
Glad he's not here, too.
his attorney's giving him bad advice. Nobody should sign that.
But
Anyway.
they are great to work with. I will say they are great to work with, but it just doesn't make sense in
It's
our
great until
situation.
somebody pulls out the contract and says, let me show
Yeah.
you what you agreed to. That's where it goes south.
Sure.
Okay, rant, done, sorry.
Thank you. Item number 3, this is municipal code amendments, construction code updates, and Lisa Romney is going to talk about this.
Thank you, Mayor. In the 2019 legislative session, the Utah legislature adopted the 2018 version of most of what we term the construction codes. So the International Building Code, the International Residential Code, Plumbing Code, Fire Code. So on most of those, you'll see they adopted the 2019 version. Some they left 2015 and then adopted some new appendix chapters. But essentially in Utah, local jurisdictions are required to adopt the same international codes that the state adopts with all of the state amendments. And so we're just recommending some municipal code amendments to bring our code into alignment with the state law for the 2018 construction codes. So we're recommending adoption of ordinance 2019-18 to reflect those changes.
People have questions for Lisa on that?
I hate this one, just,
Every year,
Just
I
so you
know,
know.
I'm sorry.
I-
Every 3 years, sorry, every 3 years.
I do too. The part of the problem we have with ADUs is coming from the state. And I understand that we have little choice, but
it's frustrating.
But the key is here in the ordinance is adopted and amended by the state of Utah. So our adoption is we're doing what the state allows us.
I understand.
It doesn't change anything
Doesn't
relative
change
to the
anything.
argument, but yes, we could have ADUs if the state would do it differently.
Okay, so I learned something today, I think, if I understood it correctly. Had some questions on this. So some of the things that are federal, the state takes out, such as sprinkling systems in homes. You seen the big home that just burnt in Holiday that was 25,000 square feet. Well, we don't require them to have a sprinkling system, but yet the federal government does. Our legislature opts out of that. So if we can get a hold of some of our legislators, they could opt out of what's keeping us from having ADUs. And I did not understand that till today.
I did understand that.
I did too.
While they have opted out of some of the sprinkling systems, when you get to, and I'm going to probably say this wrong, but when you get to 10,000 square feet, they haven't opted out of it because it's been forced down some of our residents' throat.
Okay, so those are different reasons that they've been forced down residents' throats, as far as some of them have built way up on the hill and they did not have enough pressure. So they opted to do it because if you build so high up and you don't have enough pressure, then you can only have a certain size home, because that's all our fire department. So if you go to certain areas in our city, you can only have a 7,500 square foot home, because our fire department cannot handle it, the water up there. But, so then if you want to build a bigger home, you have to do something to take some of that, to, be able to handle that. So that's why some of the residents, I was with you, I thought we had one at a certain level, but there's different reasons. There are a few cities that already had passed sprinkling codes, and they didn't take them. They said, if you already have a code, you can keep it, but if not, this is what it is. And we didn't have one at that time. But we do have certain areas in the city that if you build over a certain size, our fire department requires you to have a fire system.
And so, Robin, these changes that we're desiring take a while, and it is what we've been working on, both
Right.
directly through our state legislators and then also through the ULCT. And it won't end with this session. It'll continue to come
Right.
up. And so we just need to stay very active in that conversation, and we will.
But it's good that we footnote this discussion with it. Adopting this it's still not perfect.
Correct.
So I would motion that we adopt ordinance 2019-18 for the construction code updates.
We have a motion, we have a second? Oh,
Second.
okay, we have a second. Ready for further discussion or roll call vote? Roll call vote, starting with Councilwoman Fillmore.
Aye.
To the right.
Aye, but under protest. I don't think we have any choice, but
We don't.
I second Bill's.
Just a flat aye,
Just a flat
no
aye.
caveats.
I don't want it.
Aye, but I'm with Bill and Robin.
Motion passes 5-0. It sounds like council next meeting will want to be their own sovereign nation.
I think I think I voted nay last time around.
Mayor, if I may just address one clarification.
Thank you,
I don't
Corey.
want
You may.
Chief Bassett sitting on the YouTube just panicking right now, saying the fire department requires this. It's a level of service
Yep.
standard, and so the fire department's not requiring it themselves. It's a level of service. If you can only deliver so many gallons per minute, and some of the places we can't deliver sufficient for the size of the building, then you have to solve that, and you either tie in additional lines that deliver that flow, which can be expensive depending on what you're doing, or the fire flow calculations will let you out of the higher gallon per minute if you sprinkler. So it's not the fire department requiring it, it's the city requiring it because the level of service capacity is insufficient. So if a fire truck hooked to it and started drawing the amount of needed, you would be siphoning from somebody else's area for it. And we try to prohibit that. We build to 15,000 or 1,500 gallons a minute for fire flow. Other areas can deliver 3,000 if you're on the lower end. Higher end, you may be only to deliver 1,200. And that's when you have this gap difference that has to be made. So it's not sprinkling for the houses for sprinkler's sake. It's sprinkling the houses because the fire flow is insufficient to give you protection. Makes sense, I hope.
Thanks,
I just don't
Corey.
want Chief Bassett to say I required it because he
Really,
didn't.
I make Corey crazy when I go off with what I think I know. But I get at least half of it right.
99%.
All right, so let's move to item 4. This is the electronic meetings policy update, and I believe Leah wanted to talk about this.
I'll come down here to the microphone. So Lisa suggested that we go through the policies that the city has adopted. And the first one that we went through was the electronic meetings policy. We compared it to the state law regarding electronic meetings. And so most of the changes that we made in here were better grammar or apparently the as amended, Lisa said, no longer needs to be in there. So we took that out. We added in the tree board and the community foundation that have been, I guess, established since this was originally put together. And then we did have the little sentence there about a minimum of 2 members of the public body being present. And so I know George has a question on why.
It really boils down to if it's electronic, what is the point of an anchor per se? So if everyone else is going to be virtual, is it a statutory requirement that we have an anchor? Because theoretically, if you're holding an electronic meeting, if it's properly open, anyone should be able to join it.
Right. And no, it's not. What I did was I pulled the electronic meetings policy from various cities, Draper, Riverton, smaller cities. Some of them didn't have one. And we noticed that some of those cities had that in there. Draper, for example, you have to have at least 1 city council member physically present. Riverton, you have to have 3 members physically present, and we will say that, I'm forgetting his name.
Ryan Carter.
Yes, Ryan Carter, the city attorney there, stated that their policy is probably one of the most strict in the state. So, thus 3 people present. So in reading that, we both just decided that we would put that in there. It doesn't have to be in there.
I wonder if the intent is to still accommodate those citizens who aren't electronically, what's the word I'm looking, fluent, savvy, and so that they still could come and hear the entire meeting. So sort of like that we still have to post the notices in the newspaper. Who reads the newspaper, right? But
And that may be what it is. My thought process with it is if we have a situation where we need to convene the public body and the majority of the body is not available, like let's say the middle of next week or something, and we have an emergency requirement, but all of you have got vacations going, and
Because we so planned them, because city council meeting is this week.
right, we planned them for next week, but for whatever reason we have to have an emergency meeting, but you're all off in exotic locations. Can we get enough of the public body together to still have effective business while not, causing everyone to fly in from wherever they're at?
or an emergency meeting because an emergency has affected this location.
Right, where there's no longer an anchor necessarily, where we still need to conduct public business. So, I mean, that's probably the extreme, but that's where I was coming from. It's like, do you
Well, and I'm
really do that?
just guessing that might be the reason as to why that language is even in there. But I agree that to tie us to that, if we don't even understand the reasoning as to why, and we'd feel comfortable, like you say, if it's sufficiently set up so that the public is invited to join in electronically.
And I think your point there of it might be to help the not necessarily savvy. But to me, whether the council is all, or 2 of the members of the council are sitting staring at a speakerphone, or a staff member has pressed the button on the speakerphone and none of us are there, to me it doesn't make a difference, but I can see kind of the point.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, but this says we have to have somebody here at the anchor location, which is City Hall. So whether that's you guys are all on your exotic vacations and I'm here, I get to push play, so it's still open to the public.
Okay.
Right, but the
So-
way
But
it's
it
written is
says
it's
two members
to
of the public body.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think as we were looking at it and seeing that some other cities had put that in there, I mean, Riverton, we did talk with Ryan Carter, and he said that they're just very strict because they think that they should have a quorum. But we use the electronic meeting when we know we're not going to have a quorum, so we certainly didn't want to go with 3. But the idea is just that, yeah, if we can't get any council members here, maybe we really shouldn't have a meeting. But I think it's a good point about really in an emergency when none of you had put it on your calendar. So I think Leah and I are both fine if you'd like to take that out. It's not a statutory requirement, and if you have some problems with that and you want to keep it open for emergencies, I think you have the ability to set that in policy. And we could either take that sentence out or revise it to say no members are required to be physically
So
present.
I can see that in the case of an emergency, but knowing that I'm not going to be on the council forever, I would hate to have a council of people that really aren't giving their time. And so that to me would be a little bit of a security blanket where, you know, I'm on vacation all the time. I'm really not ever in town, but I want to be on the city council. So I call in every time, and we have a council of people that are always not here. So that would be my only thing is, you know, there's nothing that says you have to attend this many meetings per year or anything like that. So I would just hate to see us at some point. I mean, we're all very responsible and very, you know, but I just look down the road. I don't know that I would want people that were never really, you know, lived in St. George, but were just voting here once in a while. I don't know. That's-
Can't do that, there's a residency requirement.
Yeah, but if I'm just vacationing all the
The
time.
trick is you hit mute when the luau music starts.
That's my only, that would be my only concern.
As long as it doesn't prevent convening in the event of an emergency. I don't necessarily, as much as we probably would have some natural gathering points of where things would happen, I wouldn't want it to stop public business that needs to be conducted because of the unavailability of
So
council
could we
members.
add on to the end of that, unless in case of an emergency? I mean, in case the city manager
Very
declares an emergency?
Subjective that I would prefer just, if you want to be flexible, make it flexible in the policy to begin with. Declaring things emergency, I just don't know if I want to go that route. As far as, you know, what's an emergency? We need to approve this change order right now, is that an emergency? Or is it a true emergency that we have, the wind is blowing and everything's falling
I agree,
apart?
because I think that the built-in flexibility is better for the case of the emergency. And to Robin's point, hopefully the citizens would be astute enough that those people would get kicked out and voted out next time around, right? So,
I don't think anybody knows if we're here. You get on and see how many people are
well,
watching this.
shame on the citizens then, right? But that's a really, it's a really extreme example as to why not to have the flexibility in case of.
I'm
we
okay
would
with
need-
it,
we
I
need it.
just,
And we can create city council guidelines that can actually say, look, you can't participate in so many. If you participate in so many electronic meetings, you could be censured or whatever it might be. You can limit that. I'm just, you can create council guidelines to try and control that. But generally, those are created when you have a problem child.
okay.
So
Not saying you should wait, but.
is the mayor a member of the council?
He's a member of the public body, and he is a member of the council.
Okay.
He's just a non-voting member. Unless
Does
the
that
event's
need to
been
be
tied.
specified?
No.
No, the procedure section just says, look, we're going to count all procedures and things like that, and how we calculate a quorum in accordance with typical ordinances, so.
Okay. I would then propose that we approve the ordinance with a change in 2080, last sentence, a minimum of one member of the public body must be physically present at the anchor location to conduct an electronic meeting.
I could second that. If we can't get one together, we've got more serious problems.
And if we don't have to specify, and so it doesn't matter if it's the mayor or one of the city council, but one.
So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? So let's take a roll call vote on that motion with that change in 20.080. from 2 to 1. Let's start with, to my left, Councilwoman Meekum.
Aye.
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 That motion passes 5-0. Thank you. All right, we're there already. Mayor's report. I'll tell you 3 or 4 things that have happened in the last 3 weeks since we met. I toured the fire station with Chief Bassett, our fire station here in Centerville, and it was quite fascinating to tour that as we went upstairs. He showed me a section upstairs where they have simulated a manhole cover, similar like you have on the street, to where they can practice routines of going down into that manhole cover. Same dimensions and everything, because he says the public doesn't realize how difficult it is to get down those. So there's just little things like that that are in the fire station, which I found quite intriguing, and had a great experience doing that with Chief Bassett. 2 weeks ago today, I had some residents on First South call me, and we would have had a lot bigger meeting tonight because they were planning to come out and force because their road wasn't paved. But that day, people came out and we got it paved by the Friday, I believe, didn't we, Kevin? And so I hope they're all satisfied now and happy that has been done, that we're able to get that done. There have been a lot of delays. I understood in talking with Mark from the contractor, and the wet weather had caused some problems as well too. But
Can I ask for a quick summary? Do you feel that the delays were avoidable, and do you feel if they were or were not avoidable, could the communication with the citizens have been better? Where do you think the breakdown there happened?
I never had a chance to talk with Kevin, but I talked with Mark 2 or 3 times that day. I was talking to him. I was on vacation, but I was talking with him. And Mark indicated that he had stayed in constant contact with those residents that were calling, and there was more than one. There was, I think, about 3. The person that called me, I think, was one they'd asked to call me because that person knew me, but and he said he had constant contact, telling him what the status was, where we were at. It was subcontracted out. I had to take Mark's word that contractor just didn't get out here when they should have. I mean, and that the weather affected it. But I think Mark stayed in good contact with those residents that called him. But we probably could have got about a better feel, and Kevin's here, so he could tell me if I'm wrong. We could have probably done better on just keeping them generally apprised of what was going on. I don't know, were we doing that with the whole street, Kevin, or was it just those residents that Mark told me about, or don't you know?
Yeah, it was mainly just the ones that had complaints that he was keeping in touch with. One thing the contractor did is they poured some concrete waterways, and then they left. Those concrete waterways had to cure for a week. So they told us they were going to be back in 7 days, and it was 10 days before they came back. So usually the residents, if they see things happening, they're pretty happy and they're pretty patient. But once they see nothing happening is when they start to call, and rightfully so. So, we did, after that 7 days that they committed to come back, they were 3 days later than they should have been. They were supposed to be in on the 23rd or 24th of July to pave the remaining section, and they weren't there until that Friday, which was the 26th. So, they were a few days off of what they had committed to us. But Mark did a great job of keeping in touch. I talked to one resident, and as soon as we told her that it was going to be Friday, she seemed very satisfied. And it looks like they have a police radar up there now, so maybe people are going down the street too fast now. But The street's in great shape, and the contractor did a fine job, but they did.
Maybe they'll miss all that traffic control they had.
Yeah.
Was that a subcontractor that we had used in the past and have been happy with overall?
Yes, Advanced Paving is the contractor. They did have some subcontractors doing the concrete work. We've used Advanced in the past, and they have been reliable. They are also the contractor that will come in after the water line work is done up on 600 South and 650 South. So
I was going to say, that's where I'm hearing the complaints right now.
Yes. Orman Construction, and I wouldn't be surprised that we'll get some more complaints. Orman Construction pulled both of their crews off of 600 South, 650 South, so they could go down on 400 East and get that storm drain done before the tour of Utah. So they're trying to get that patched and paved Monday and Tuesday of next week. The tour of Utah is on the Thursday. So, and then they're going to take both crews back up to 600 South and 650 South, and hopefully just have a couple more weeks before the road can begin to get rebuilt. So, a lot going on up in that neighborhood especially. Yeah.
So I felt Mark, like I said, in over an hour or two time period, I called him 2 or 3 times. The resident called me, I called them back, relaying information. And I felt he did a great job at, as Kevin reiterated, of working with those that were saying complaints, but maybe it was a short enough stretch and it had been torn apart long enough. Maybe we could have taken flyers door to door or something saying what was going on, you know, or something of that nature that could have helped out, because according to the person I talked to, there was going to be quite a number of them that would have been here tonight, you know, had we not got it done. So
I agree. I mean, just hearing the explanation the concrete had to cure, oh, well, there's a reason they're not showing up. If the residents are aware of that, because it would be really disconcerting to have your road ripped up and then have nobody show up, right?
because that's exactly what happened. The 7 to 10 days to cure thing, Mark told me as well too, and I called the person back that called me and said that's why the deal is right now, it has to cure, and they said, oh, okay, I understand that.
Yeah.
So what's the schedule for the rest of the project?
Yeah, I mean,
And I was able to tell
it's all
them.
about expectations if you just know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
It would seem to me that I can understand people getting upset because you got a total of 10 days, but being 3 days late would not seem to be totally out of line.
Right, and that's what I'm saying, is they had already, though, gotten very upset because
Yeah.
they didn't understand
No, I
the
understand- I
7
understand.
days.
the dilemma, this was in July, and it was first torn apart in about, was it April?
I think so.
Yeah, the Dual Creek Irrigation Company was actually up there probably.
Kevin, could you come up to the mic, because they won't hear you out in the...
So I think that was, while he's coming up, that was some of their concern.
They had it torn up for the whole
Yeah,
bad
since it's been
weather
torn
and
apart so
everything
long.
else.
Yes, Dual Creek Irrigation Company came in first, and that was probably in late February. They were trying to get their systems up and running by April 15th, irrigation season. And so there were 3 separate contractors in there, 3 separate projects, and it was a somewhat long and drawn-out process. The residents, for the most part, were very patient, and but again, when they saw those 7 to 10 days of nothing happening, like, oh, wait a minute, what's going on here? Usually when they see people working, they're busy, they're getting it done, but that was kind of when the complaints started to come in, is when that week of nothing happening.
Right, yeah, that's, yeah. Thanks, Kevin. Next item was, Friday morning is over at Big 5 Sports, and I came out in that empty building where there'd been a clothing store and then I guess the food storage place. The weeds were quite high, so I just grabbed the phone and called the number of the leasing agent and said, what's the deal? And they were good. They said, we have a new property manager. We'll get over there to take them down. And he said that we should have that lease shortly. And so I haven't been over there since to see how they've done, but That same discussion told me that the owner of that building also owned over there where Iggy's is. And I think you've already heard that there's probably going to be some sort of something come before Planning Commission and then us of changing what they may want to be put there on that spot. So that's my report, I think. Unless you have any other further questions for me. I did other couple of fun things. The new play is kind of fun, Spelling Bee. I was a guest speller at it last night. That was kind of fun. So you don't know who you're going to get each night if you go to that play as the guest speller. So, but that was a fun play. So, if nothing else for me, then we'll go to number 6, the city manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a number of items. The first item I want to talk about is the Island View Park. Today we were informed of a conflict. We have that natural gas line that goes through the northern part of that park. Well, Dominion is not okay. I think it's Dominion is not okay with concrete on top of that. So our tennis court is actually our most northern part of our second court is actually going over that. So we have to make a change order to that side of the park. So just letting you know, we're going to go through a process and find out what we can put there. But the initial reaction right now is possibly reducing that to 2 pickleball courts because that will fit in between there. So we'll have 1 tennis court and 2 pickleball courts. We're limited as far as what we can put there, but we've got to go through a process. Another thing that came up is just making a grassy area, just open space and nothing there, but we can't have concrete on that 30 to 32 foot easement on either side of that pipeline.
Which used to be the playground?
Which used to be the playground, correct. So since our tiered playground on the southern side of the park kind of pushed our tennis courts to the north, that's what put the tennis court on top of that gas line. And I don't know if you know, but that gas line serves all of Wasatch Front, basically, from Ogden, to North Salt Lake. I should say all of Wasatch Front, Ogden, North Salt Lake.
I was thinking, that's great to know what's underneath our playground.
It's huge. So just so you know, we're looking at what are our options there.
Should not our architects and designers have
Caught that?
caught that?
We've had that conversation, and Bruce and myself had that conversation today, and we think that responsibility is borne by the architects, and the cost for the redesign should be mostly borne, or if not at all, by the architects. So we'll have to renegotiate some of that cost.
I happened to be walking by the room with Bruce and Lisa and Brian at the same time and asked the same question, Bill. So
yeah, we're all on the same page. This is one of those things where we hire the experts to guide and direct and not advise us. And again, we don't want to create an adversarial relationship with them. We think they've been great to this point. We want to work with them, but we just want to stress, I guess, our disappointment and frustration with this. So we will.
While we're talking about the park, can I just throw in one thing? There is a volunteer apricot tree that is on the south side, and it does not appear to be scheduled to be taken out. And I don't know of any city employees or citizens who are going to want to pick up the fruit off of the playground equipment. Just
okay.
FYI, I know I've had
Good
a
to
couple
know.
of residents who have mentioned it to me, and I don't know the best way to deal with that.
No, that's great. We'll look into it.
So is the natural exercise of this process where
It's high
all
enough
of our
that
other
you can't-
easements
you
are,
can't even
and
get a
our
ladder
survey
to pick
lines,
it,
and
so.
the rest of our Ts are
But it all
crossed?
falls.
Yes, we'll be reevaluating all that with the architects, making sure we're on the same page. Along those same lines, I sent you an email, I believe yesterday, regarding a change order that, is that related to phase 2 of this project? I wasn't anticipating any cost to phase 2 this early in the project, but we saw our first one. So this is not increasing the overall cost of the project, just the overall contract we have for phase 1 with this construction company. So what we'll be bringing before you, Lisa and I are just looking through the legality of what we can do, just an addendum to our existing agreement to include phase 2. Because I don't want to go out and rebid. Be honest with you, I think we're going to see an increased cost. So if they're willing to honor, which they are, the unit costs they provide for phase 1, I want to continue that through. But we need to keep the 2 projects separate because our grant requires us to keep those separate. Phase 1 is for these items, and Phase 2 is everything else. So I think Lisa and I have a pretty good idea of how we want to do that. You just may not see the agreement before you until the second meeting in September, but we'll work on that. So you might see a couple more change orders until we get that done. And I say the second meeting in September because of timing issues. Lisa and I will be out. Yeah, anyway, we'll get it done. But the change orders will be, absorbed into that addendum. But I'll keep you apprised of any change orders like I did and let you know the cost and all that and what's it for. Volunteer appreciation dinner is scheduled for September 16th for your calendars. And Councilmember Ince is not happy about that. And the joint work session is scheduled for September 10th. That is a Tuesday, the second Tuesday.
That's with the Youth Council.
Correct.
And what time is that?
Oh, I don't have the time. What time do we usually do it? I don't have the time in front of me.
Okay, so the dinner is the 16th?
We usually
Correct.
done it before, right, at 5:30 or 6 o'clock or
Usually, yeah.
something?
It's
But-
pretty short.
But the
least
10th
the
is
year
a-
one
The
year.
10th,
is
the
not a
10th isn't
regular.
a meeting date, is
That's
the,
my museum date.
Oh, it isn't. Yeah, that's true.
because the second
I don't have
is-
times on here.
Yeah, that doesn't make any
What they're
sense.
saying is not a city council day. We've,
Correct. It's
Yeah.
not.
So we normally have the youth council work session as just a work session before a council meeting, not as a.
Is that what
sep-
we've done in the past?
Yeah.
And we encourage them to stay, but then they never do.
I can speak to Lisa and see if we can maybe reschedule that to September 3rd or September
3rd or
17th.
17th.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's easy to do. Okay.
What time's the dinner?
I have it on my calendar at 6.
At 6 sounds familiar. It's not in my email from Lisa, but I
And
think
then
it
the
was 6.
16th was the volunteer dinner.
Correct.
Right. Yeah, I have it listed as
It's
6.
6 on the 16th. And we don't need to put the other one in it as of
So
now.
it might be changing.
Okay,
I'll make it part of the Friday update, weekly update, so you know.
okay.
All right, 10 more items to go. Oh, okay, so Sunday, Councilmember Ince sent out an email regarding a water leak at the school. And one of the concerns that came out of that is we don't have an after-hours call list. It's just blatantly obvious of who you call. And so what we're doing with that is Leah's been asked to compile, don't you act concerned, we've talked about it. Jeez. We're going to create and put it on our website, call-out list, not just for city, water, streets, drainage, but also Rocky Mountain, Dominion, sewer. So we tend to get calls for all those other entities, fire, whatever it might be. We'll have all entities that we can think of, and if we're missing something, please let us know, and we'll add that to it. But we want to make it obvious. Great thing about moving to Bountiful is Bountiful actually does a really good job dealing with these after hours. From what I understand, Davis County didn't do a great job kind of calling us and letting us know, but Bountiful is on top of that. So generally, if it's after hours, for example, if you call that Public Works main line, it does go to
Transfer
dispatch,
station.
and then they have a call tree, which I'm not really a fan of, where they just call Randy or they call Mike. I really want to talk about doing an on-call phone, because right now we're sending out Mike, who's not cheap. Mike is good at what he does, but I'm wondering if we need to start implementing a on-call type system, because we really don't have one here.
So like a flip phone that you're just forwarding to everyone else to
Correct.
sell? Okay.
And then you just pass it on. If whoever's on call, it's your turn, Councilmember McEwen, you've got the phone.
Forward it where you want.
Yep.
And it's on you to answer it.
Correct.
With an on-call situation, or what are we doing in terms of, if we're going to formalize that, then we're going to, you get paid 2 hours unless you get on-call that exceeds 2 hours, or at least a minimum of 2 hours in a 24-hour period?
So we'll look at that policy as far as, I don't know if we have an existing policy. I don't think we do. As for public works specifically, not, but for police, we do.
Well, we do have an on-call policy that if they get called out, but yeah, and then it's going to bring up an issue in the police department on-call.
And Chief and I have talked about the on-call with the police department, because again, being on call, even if you don't get called out, you get paid for the minimum of 2 hours, which is
Right.
great, but, if you're on call, that prevents them from living the way they choose. They can't leave the state or leave the city. They can't, they've got to be, and so there should be some compensation per hour, whether it's $2 an hour. It's usually pretty minimal to be on call. But we'll bring that to you as we talk about this policy. Randy's not 100% on board with it yet, and so we'll talk it through it and see what the benefits are. It might not change, but I want to work with Randy and see what the benefits are, and then of course it'll impact other departments as well.
Yeah, if it's going to be a formalized on-call process, which requires a response window, so if we're going to say you're on call and you have to pick up the phone or you need to respond within X amount of time, then
Right.
I think we're obligated to compensate them whether or not they get the call that night.
But nonetheless, the first step is actually creating this list. If anything, that's a minimum. We want to make sure that's on our website. Obviously where it is, obvious and who you need to call when there's an emergency and after hours. Finally, I'll talk about the IRMA conference. IRMA conference was awesome. First conference I've been to. It was great. The first session was Diversity Today. Gentleman, Mauricio Velasquez was there to talk about diversity. And, it's one of these where you're like, diversity, oh my goodness, He was dynamic. It was a good conversation. He got us engaged. Intent versus impact. What your intent could be different than how you actually impacted people, and be aware of that. Talked about a class divided. Do you ever remember that front line class divided where the teacher separated the students based on eye color? Blue eyes over here were kind of taken care of, and the brown eyes were the lesser. And we talked about that XR, and it was really interesting. And of course, Oprah did a little bit later, brought that same teacher, Jane Elliott, I believe is her name, brought that teacher on Oprah Winfrey's show and did the same thing to her audience. Put the brown eyes, they had to stand in the back, watch the blue eyes eat this really good meal. And anyway, it was really fascinating in how we attack groups and not the individuals. When we're upset about something, we attack a group and not the specific individual, and how we need to be careful about that and let people in. How to train the next generation of supervisors. Marilee Richens with the state. I believe she's the deputy director of the administrative services. She was great. She talked about being integrity and how important it is to keep your commitments. And honestly, there's times where I just want to say, I don't have time for this. This weekend, it happened 3 times where I made a promise and I followed through, and I remembered. I probably would have anyway, but it was just that reminder that when we make a commitment, we need to follow through. Respond to emails within a certain amount of time. Respond to voicemails within a certain amount of time. It was really good to have that reminder that that's part of, being responsive in our duty. So, very good conversation on that. And then, of course, how we talk to our employees, leadership competencies, workforce competencies, and how we do performance evaluations with them, and how we make it a contract with them, and we say, hey, look, you're lacking in this area, but here's how we improve it. I can go into a lot of time. Talk about the return to work program. Here's what a big deal. So South Jordan has a return to work program. They require all employees to come back to work regardless. If they require the employees to get a letter saying what they can and can't do, and they have to return to work. And so they create this entire program, and that's something that keeps their claims, their worker comp claims down, their EMOD down, and so I'm going to be working with South Jordan to find out what we can do. And this is an area where Jake is going to help, and Jake's not here, but Jake will help develop that program so we can reduce our workers' comp claims, which I did meet with the trust Monday and talk about our EMOD, which is at 0.71, which is awesome. The expected workers' comp claims should be around 1 is your EMOD. We're at 0.71. But we're doing really well here for the city on a national average. And then the last conference was a tough one. Last session was employee fatality panel discussion. So Wayne Pyle was there with West Valley and the officer and the code enforcement officer he had lost. David Robbins with Draper was up there discussing the firefighter that died in the fires in California, and Ogden with the 2 officers that they had lost. And so it really was, what are we doing to prepare if we do have a situation here? They talked about some of their lessons learned about having a victim's advocate with you when you go and notify the family. See, these are things I don't know that I'll be meeting with the chief to find out exactly what we have set up, and if we don't, what can we do to improve it? Having a bank account set up right away for donations to go to, because that's the first thing we receive, right? So go to the bank, set up that. Have an HR staff, executive staff all ready to go in kind of an EOC type situation. Decide who's going to go visit the family, right? I guess it differs for departments, so the police department has a next of kin form. Is that something we need to possibly implement for other employees, like Public Works? That tends to be a challenging position that you might need that next of kin form, and who do you approach? So, anyway, that's going to be a big one that I'll be meeting with the chief primarily about to see what we need to do to make sure we're ready to go if we have that.
If, not when.
If we have that situation arise, we're ready to go. So, very good conference.
Based on, add to that list, or I would suggest that you add to that list, insurance beneficiary forms.
So we talked about that. So it was really interesting. So one of the officers who passed away had actually a girlfriend that the family didn't like. And so how do you deal with that issue? So one of the things we talked about was there's a lot of money out there that supports these families, and making sure we have a list of those resources out there that we can send these the families to, and saying, look, this agency has this pot of money that you can apply to help with your transition, your grief.
Well, the one that has hit me in the last couple of weeks is someone who failed to change their 401k beneficiary from their divorced spouse to their current spouse.
Yeah, that could be a problem.
Yeah, that can be a big problem.
Yeah, because the insurance company is going to say, well, this is what's on it. I can't change that. Yeah, that's a good point. So make sure that's up to date with all of our employees. Great. Any questions for me? I will say Thursday and Friday I will be out taking a personal vacation. Need to catch up on some time with my family, so I didn't have them for 4 months basically. So we're going to head to Lake Tahoe for a couple of days. So just so you know, I'll be out of the office. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Brent. Hey, and along those lines, just Brent and Jake both went to Irma. I know that we've received email from Leah if we are going to sign up for any league meetings by Thursday. And since I've been mayor, I've gone to 2 in St. George and 1 in Salt Lake, and I can always find really good sessions. I know it can be difficult because it's during working hours, but I've found some really good sessions. I think has been very effective in helping myself and Councilman Ince and in working with Lisa, the legislative policy committee, where we were up at the legislature once a week during the session and fighting against House Bill 441, just making those connections, and they'll talk about that sort of stuff too. So if you're able to do it, there can be some really good sessions. Is that the date you told us, Leah? Was it the 8th?
The 9th.
By Friday? Okay. All right, let's go to number 7, minutes review and acceptance. We are review and accepting the July 16th City Council work session minutes and the July 16th City Council minutes. Do we have any proposed changes to those minutes?
Motion to accept the minutes as recorded.
Second.
We have a motion in 2 seconds. Pick Leah, who you want to put down.
Now let's see who's your favorite.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Item number 8, I don't know of a reason for a closed meeting. I have not been told by any of you as well, so I assume there is no reason for a closed meeting.
We have no surprises for you tonight, Mayor.
Okay. I appreciate to know before the meeting, just like you want to know about appointments before.
Fair enough.
We like to surprise you.
Okay. If there's not anything else, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Council's closed. Thank you.
Unbelievable.
Push the button.
You're hearing this.